Oktoberfest starts today, so.
It's not October.
Well, I know, but Oktoberfest always happens the week before.
Germans are always early.
Last week, yeah.
Yep. Good day to be in Munich.
We have a little bit of German in there, but mostly it's the Scandinavian that comes through.
Yeah, so we don't people drinking.
I'm not a beer girl.
Me and my whiskey are give me death. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Roll call. We got no Tim, but everybody else is here, which is great. Great that people are here. Not great that Tim's not here. Gosh, I just stopped opening my mouth. Time for the open forum. Anyone who has anything to address the council can come up and address the council. Anybody? Come on up. Sit down. Tell us who you are.
I'm super nervous. I don't know why, so I wrote it down. I'm Stephanie Lindstrom, citizen of Grand Marais, in Cook County at large. I am here tonight to address the city on your process and how you look at ordinances, enforcement, and deciding on which issue you focus on. I'm seeing a pattern of citizens doing things against ordinances and then selective follow-through. If you are a citizen and ask for information, you'll likely have an official format to follow, which is as it should be. My example that I have is when my husband and I decided to extend the roof line on our house and meet the setback requirements. We had to pay for a special permit and then wait for our neighbors to be informed, and then they could have an opportunity to speak out, which is fine. But if we had just done that, gone ahead and extended our roof line, would anyone even have noticed? And if there was someone that noticed, it would likely be a citizen who'd call and complain and bring that to light. So in our mind, we prefer to pay the extra money to ensure that we're doing things above reproach and don't have to deal with those negative consequences later. But it did make me think, what would have happened if we did just extend our roof line? Would there have been any follow-through? Could we have saved ourselves $300 or whatever it was? So I'm here tonight to challenge you to have a vision for your ordinances. At times that might mean fines, follow-up, removal of structures, and hard conversations. I do not like the model that you're functioning under right now. I have been told by city officials that the only form of action that I have, if I were to notice something, were to be to call the sheriff's department and make a formal charge if I wanted that ordinance to be enforced. I don't think that's fair to require citizens to enforce city regulations, and then also you end up having bad relationships with people in your community. I was surprised to read about Sydney's having to come to the city to discuss the lighthouse structure that was built. I guess in my head I'm just thinking of ordinances and which ones are enforced and why. When I look at the other lines of other businesses on that street and the areas around it, I don't see much difference in the sidewalk line. For example, the Shoreline has their sidewalk along the curb, and then they have benches and a wall in the parking lot. And then across the street we have Fireweed, and there's the sidewalk, and then there's the bike racks. Beth's Fudge also has a sidewalk, and then the sandboxes. And so maybe part of it is understanding where those measurements are from the setbacks. Is it from the center line? I know there's parking on one side and not on the other. But I do see people get away with lots of different things, and I guess I was surprised that there wasn't an ordinance being enforced here. And I'm just kind of wondering what that process was. I've seen people cutting up city and county curbs with no consequence or fee. And it makes me wonder, is it who you know that allows these things to be overlooked? I sure hope not. In closing, when I've reflected on why we have these guidelines in place, I see safety and order. I don't like to see vehicles, boats, and campers parked in front of fire hydrants. I don't like walking around campers when walking in an area designated for pedestrians. I don't like seeing the city and county parking being destroyed with no consequences. I don't like to speculate that it sure seems like there's preferential treatment happening in our city. In the end, please be forward thinking and have a plan for how you will follow through on your decisions and having ordinances that the city can enforce. An example is I'm really glad about the parking that's going to be happening, the even odd or the seasonal parking. I'm skeptical that there will be follow through on how that will be enforced as the winter proceeds. And I know from experience that if people start to see a group of citizens not moving things, then it's going to just spiral and no one's going to be moving their vehicles. So thank you for taking time to listen. I've been processing this for a long time, and I know many of you and know that you're really listening to citizens as a whole. But I just, in this one area, I would like to see just some more forward thinking and have a vision. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right. Close the open forum, move on to the consent agenda. Typical 3 things on the consent agenda, unless someone with something that they'd like to add to the agenda or would like to pull for conversation, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is the question on that, is this part of the consent agenda, or is this different?
If people have questions about it, we can handle it after, otherwise we could add it to the bills to be paid.
I'd approve the consent agenda with the addition of the application and
LHP.
certification for payment
From LHB.
from LHB.
Or is this
For
Thorson?
For
For Thorson.
Thorson's.
Okay, here. Okay. All right, so there's a motion. Is there a second for that?
Or if not, we can talk about it
If
separately
not-
too.
No, I wasn't here, so, and I have not reviewed, so, as far as the minutes go, I just would rather not be part of the motioning, since
Okay.
I wasn't here to see it, or
Well-
take part in it.
I'm willing to second that to move it on to discussion. So I'll second that, and then we'll move on to discussion. So does anybody have any discussion on the motion, on the consent agenda and or the application for payment for Thorson's work? Hearing none, then, do you need another second? Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. Hearing none, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay, so we're moving right on. Important business to deal with right here. We have an application for a haunted house street closure. You want to come on up, Dan? Yep. So tell us a little bit about what you guys are working on here. This sounds pretty exciting.
Dan Earl, business owner of Marais and a Cook County resident. And this is Jane Rainham, her idea. We'd like,
Well, she's done this before.
oh yeah,
So
we'd like to do it the old funeral home in the appropriate location. The upstairs where the, what do you call it, the chapel was, to put that together and make a haunted house.
And then the application is for a street closure on
Yeah,
3 days, or
Yeah,
2 days including.
Yeah, 3 nights. On the night of trick or treat night, I've asked Sheriff Eliason to, we're going to hire law enforcement. Just got to think we'll have a lot of kids running around, so. And the request is to block off the 2nd Avenue from the corner to the alleyway, just to allow no traffic right there, so.
Second Street?
2nd Street,
Street.
which is
Yep.
where the rampway is on the
Yep.
funeral home,
Okay, cool.
so.
If we're gonna block it off, we should block
The whole block.
all the way off.
Yeah. 'cause
Okay,
otherwise you
corner
get
to
people-
corner?
Yeah,
Okay.
Otherwise you get people turning in there and then they can't really get out.
and that alley's not a great one to drive down.
No.
No.
So that's details to follow, but I think a lot of the stuff is coming together pretty good.
Okay.
Should be fun.
So you're planning on doing it,
Yep.
and have they gotten all the application stuff in that they need in order to?
You're looking at it, so
Great. I was wondering if there was like a more formal application or if there's just a letter of intent to do that.
Part of what we want to do is we want to collect for the food shelf,
Cool.
so that'll be part of it. It's kind of the main reason we're doing it.
you're not actually planning on setting anything up in the street.
No.
No, it'll be on the property,
Yeah.
it'll be on the porch, right?
Probably the walkway in would be the starting point. But for people meandering around, I thought, we can shut the street down just to be safe.
Yeah, that's fair. Does anybody have any questions about what they're asking for? I think it seems pretty straightforward.
I don't have a question, I I don't know if it's necessary to shut the street down. We don't shut town down during Halloween. And it's nothing against your process, but we've had a funeral home that operated there for many years, back when there used to be visitations and a lot of people moving about. We're talking about a couple nights that are not high traffic volume times in Grand Marais. We don't close streets down for any other nights. They're off the street as far as their entrance, their exit. So I don't really see the point in having to close the street.
Any clarification?
Nope, it's just a request, so we can move forward either way.
Yeah.
Okay. What do the rest of you guys think about it? I mean, if you don't feel like it's gonna, if it's gonna take something away from the experience, then
It shouldn't.
okay.
We just thought on Beggars Night or Trick or Treat Night that we could have up to 500 people.
Wow. Yeah, that's totally true.
So it's, we can put barricades up on the sidewalk to keep people off of the street. Use the county barricades in that way, just to tell people wait in line on the sidewalks.
We could provide, I mean, we don't need a formal motion to provide them with some barricades just to keep people on the sidewalk, do we? Or keep people off the street?
No.
No?
No, we're happy to lend stuff out for events like that. I guess I'm with you. I'm not sure if I see the need for closing the street or the benefit of closing the street, especially on a night where you're expecting people to walk around. So, but it's also not a big deal if we want to close the street. It wouldn't really be an inconvenience, I don't think, for
Right.
very many people.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Up to you.
I can see either way. I mean, I think if you feel more comfortable with the idea of it, then I'd support a motion to shut it down. I totally agree with you guys. I don't think it's, but if you guys want to handle it and
Either
you
way.
want to try it, then I'd make that motion anyway, just to support their effort. if
Motion to
that's-
shut it down?
Yeah.
Is there a second for that motion?
How many nights are you looking at?
3.
29, 30, 31? 5 to 9? Okay.
Is there a second?
Well, if I think it'd be safer, if you think it'd be safer,
Not
I
having,
will second the motion.
Okay.
Just on a safety reason. I mean, if it's gonna be crowds congregating there, it's never been done before, so we don't
Right.
know. So,
there's no baseline to work with.
you
Totally.
know,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just
And
thinking.
maybe if you do it again next year and you're like, it wasn't necessary, then we don't have to do it next
If
year.
it goes well this year, it'll be better next year.
There you go.
That's
awesome.
the attitude. That's the
There you go.
attitude.
Awesome.
All right, so any further discussion on this? I mean, I agree
Does that
with-
impact any homeowners along there that may need to?
Nobody has access on that,
exit?
on Second there.
Already talked to
Access the
Chris, he's
alley.
cool with it.
The alleys.
On the north side,
Well, and they'll
And-
just be, I mean, there'll be
and,
barriers, but there'll be ways around them, so.
I'm not sure if anybody.
Well, you're either shutting down the street or you're not shutting down the street.
Well, for access
That's
for
what
people that live there.
You're asking,
Mhm.
and that's what they're.
Yeah.
We haven't talked to anybody up there, so I don't know what people
I
think.
talked to Chris, he's good with it. He's the only neighbor on that street, so.
Okay.
And his access is on the avenue, so.
Right. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? I mean, I feel like, bring back some feedback, depending on, whether the motion passes or not. Bring back some feedback.
We'll
and
do that.
Let us know how it works, because it's kind of an experiment then as well for us, so. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries. So we'll have those barriers dropped off on the 29th.
Okay. Probably won't be the first night, I don't expect that much, but definitely on trick or treat night.
Well, we'll have them dropped off,
Okay.
and then, kind of leave it up to you guys for putting them out,
All right,
so.
will do.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll see you there.
All right,
So
wonderful.
something-
No.
Good push. Good
Nope.
Bring your kids.
Sorry, no offense. Nope.
Come on.
Nope.
Can't at least
In a
drop off
mortuary?
something.
Nope.
No.
Ain't happening.
I got a nine-year-old who's excited about stuff like that, so.
Good.
Yeah, we'll at least scare him good once, so that'll be good.
Trick-or-treating again, yeah.
Right. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is an update on the city-county agreement conversations. So when's our next meeting with the county?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, Yeah, so that's going to be, the reason we have this on the agenda tonight is so that we can go over and make sure that we're fresh on the agreements that we're talking about and the agreements that, you know, what needs work, what's going well, so that we have a basis of what we want to discuss tomorrow. That's pretty much the bottom line of what we have in front of us. From our previous brainstorming and, you know, workshop that we had, we came up with a list of the different parts and pieces of the different agreements we wanted to talk about. We only made it through street maintenance and law enforcement. The community center one is one that,
We're expecting the county to take the lead on that
Yeah.
conversation. It's really their contract that we're just a funder for.
so for the street maintenance agreement and the law enforcement agreement, those are two things that we need to discuss. I appreciate the color coding on here. Green means that it's working pretty well. Black means that it's, you know, and red means we need to work on this. So
I just want to clarify for people that didn't have the benefit of sitting through the process with you that the ratings are not based on people's performance or
Correct.
departments, whether they're doing good work or not, that's not the issue at all. The departments are doing good work for the things they're asked to do. This was a rating of, is the agreement we have with the county working to provide these functions or not? And there were a few of these functions where we identified that we need to find a better way to achieve them. So something to think about, talking about changes in the agreement with the county. So most of this memo is just a reminder of the previous conversation to spur any more if you want to talk about it before tomorrow, but the bottom third of it is talking about kind of the next steps. And so we've got in front of you now a summary that the staff's put together, and Lenny's here as well if you need to chat about anything. But we thought we needed to have an inventory of who's doing what. The county could probably do this as well. I'm sure there's things that they do that we don't have on this list just because we didn't think of them.
we planning on bringing this tomorrow?
I think we want to provide it, yeah.
I think
So
that's
what I want
a
to
good
provide
idea.
tomorrow, my thought would be, we let them know what the areas that you saw as important outcomes for these agreements were, which ones you think we need to make some changes to contracts to get improvement on, and then talk about the process of looking at these actual functions that are occurring and making sure that they're the ones that we want, or if there's any ones that we're looking for changes on. And I think that at that point, we're really ready to hand it over to a smaller group of people to start drafting up contracts that could come back to boards for you to consider. So I don't know if we have to spend a lot of time talking about this tonight, but I wanted to just have it available for you if you wanted to before your tomorrow meeting with the county.
And I actually would like to take it a step farther than that, and have the council go through items on this agreement page that we've worked out before, and maybe just get an understanding of the different things that are written down that we need to work on, so that when we go into the conversation with the county, then we all kind of understand what we're talking about, and what the expectation is, or what our understanding of the shortcoming is. I don't think that needs to take a ton of time, and a lot of that will basically just be bringing ourselves up to speed with the expectations that we want to bring to the meeting, because once we get into the meeting with the county, things are going to play out in whatever way they play out. So, are there any of these topics, to then proceed, are there any of these topics that you would like more description or explanation for, or have questions about that we should discuss before we sit down with the county? Because if there's not, then we're sweet. Move on.
What about those areas where we, like 4th Avenue West, right? Is it 4th? Where we have, like 5th Avenue West, it sounds like the process in getting that to be fixed up and to be repaired, like that conversation is working between the county and the city and the different people involved in doing that. But what about some of those other projects. And of course, Fourth Avenue West pops out of my head. Because that's one where it seems like for, years, probably, we've had, like, whose responsibility is that? And nobody, and maybe that's in accountability, right? Maybe that's where that falls. And of course, there's nothing listed under accountability on either person's, on either party's.
I thought that was kind of amusing.
I don't know. I guess that's like, how are those types of things resolved? Instead of like this just prolonged stalemate of like.
Talk about it, but nothing happens.
Right.
I mean, I think you guys probably went out and put gravel in at some point, but that lasted.
We have many times.
Last
Right,
of the-
yeah,
last of the
but
week,
it
when
lasts,
rained,
it rains and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So,
What,
and it
yeah,
may
it's
be-
not that nothing happens, right?
No, I'm not saying
But,
nothing,
I mean, Craig was.
but not a real,
What do you mean?
not a permanent, no, he's saying stuff happens, but it
Yeah,
doesn't
I'm saying
last.
stuff happened, but when we talk about it, like actually fixing it and repairing it.
Having some sort
really
of
do
decision
nothing
made on it.
happening.
There hasn't
And-
been an active
And who
decision
does it
made on
actually
it.
belong to do that?
I mean, not just Band-Aid stuff. I'm talking
Like a decision about
doing it.
And I don't
And
know if
that
there's
wouldn't be
others
your
like that.
department, that would be
Right.
with
But I have
ours.
met with Kristen and Charlie and looked at it, and Kristen was supposed to get back to us with some options.
Okay.
So I don't know where that's at this point.
Okay.
So
When-
maybe
do you know
it's
when
just
you
about
met?
us approaching them and saying, hey, this needs to be fixed.
Well, and, we haven't.
What's the stalemate here? What's the problem?
We haven't
We don't
been
want
in-
to pay, they should pay, we should both pay.
Who owns it? is
That's the
question.
issue? Okay.
Yeah.
And it's an easy one to solve.
Okay.
It's gonna take some time, and the reason that we're not doing it now is because we thought getting this agreement finished first made sense. And rather than just do nothing in the meantime, we talked to Kristen and the highway department about what sort of, we'll put some gravel in the holes, but can we also do kind of an intermediate term fix that will last a little bit longer to buy us some time to figure out what's the best way to do the long-term fix. I mean, this isn't the only road in the community that needs maintenance work, and we have to prioritize the ones that we do work on. We can't just say, oh, that one's bad, we have to go fix it now.
Well, no, I agree, but that's one of the things, I guess, as we're looking through this list, that I'm trying to be clear on is
Yeah.
when we come into situations where there is, right, if it's First Avenue West, it's very clear, that's the city's responsibility, and whatever's in the ground underneath that street, the street itself and the sidewalks out to the property line, that's the city's responsibility to take care of.
Yes.
We all have been benefited by the county taking care of snow removal off the streets, right? While we take care of the sidewalks, I'm just picking that street.
Yeah.
But what my point is these areas where it's this, when we get into like real maintenance on roads that have commonality or there's disagreements to who's responsible.
I don't think there's another example like this one.
Is that, maybe and that's it, that's
Well,
great,
it's-
if it's just Fourth Avenue West, then like, okay, like, then we can come to that, but I didn't want it to be like, oh yeah, it's also Second Avenue, or whatever, Sixth Avenue East, or some other random one.
No, there are a lot of other roads that the county used to manage that we manage now because the areas were annexed in the past 20 or 30 years.
Okay.
That are also in a similar situation to Fourth Avenue in that they were not constructed to the standards that we would construct a road to. So the types of maintenance we're going to do on them is a little bit different than what we would do on a 40-foot paved with curb on both sides.
Sure.
But Fourth Avenue's issue is there's this transition between it was a county road and it ought to be a city road, and it's not complete. And part of that transition needs to be that the county either gives it to us in good condition or has a way to fund it being in good condition before we take over the ownership of it.
They can't hand us over a destroyed street.
I don't know why we'd accept it.
Right.
So.
No, but how long is this waited? Do we need to have, the washout that destroyed that road was 8 years ago. Do we bear some responsibility and financial responsibility to that because we've never met with the county for whatever reason?
Right.
At this point, do we sit down together and say, let's hand it over, but it's kind of a 50-50 thing?
Well, I hope so. I hope that's kind of the way the conversation goes. It's at this point, this road specifically, Fourth Avenue West, I made a specific note on this agreement for the conversation tomorrow. I'm sure it'll come up. Like when I first got elected, it came up as a problem, and we're talking 4 or 5 years ago now, and And so I asked Mike about it, and he said, well, it's a county road. They told us it's a county road. And so then I sent a message to the county administrator and the engineer and said like, oh, well, this is a county road. You know, what's your plan to deal with this? And they said, well, we don't have a plan. It's a city road. And so I said, oh, okay. Well, I talked to him, and I said, well, we'll take care of it then. And then they were like, you can't do that. It's a county road. So it's just like this expectation. Like we actually need to. I feel like now we're staging this conversation in the right place, so that we can actually have one to get something done.
And I didn't mean to bog us down on that particular street, but what I was
It's
more
a
talking about was
sticky wicket.
because of that street.
Well, it's a popular street.
Because of that-
It's complained about all the time, so.
Right.
Yeah, because of that street, I just was wondering, as we're bringing things up tomorrow in accountability and like resolutions to things, is there something else besides that we didn't know about, or I don't know about? That
Other
we
ones
should
that
bring
could
up?
be coming down.
And so it's great,
right?
if it's that one, then we can come to a resolution, we get all this stuff.
There are other roads where we've had disagreements about who should be doing service on them, but not because of ownership, just because of issues that are more related to this contract. And you can see on this list of areas that our staff is doing snow removal. It's actually kind of all over the place, right? And it's based again on, if you think back to the first conversation we had with the county, one of our goals that we want to do here is have the right staff with the right equipment do the right things. And sometimes the city staff and the city equipment is better at doing something, whether it's a city or county road, and sometimes it's the other way around. So, and there's some gray area in between that, like the business park, for instance, that we've wanted to have county staff have as part of their snowplow routes, and that hasn't always been that case, and so we've had to take it over as a snowplow route, and you know, but that's a different issue than the ownership of Fourth Avenue.
But
To
is it-
put it in the context of this agreement, however, the agreement needs to be flexible too. You can't list, here's what the city does, here's what the county does, because the needs are gonna change over time, and we need to be able to have these conversations and figure out, okay, well, who is the best to do this work, and then how do we account for it when it's done?
So I guess I'd ask, is that conversation, like you talk about the business park and you guys plowing that with a 1 ton,
With a pickup,
right?
Yeah.
Is that a conversation that we talk about tomorrow, or is that when it breaks down to subcommittees and actually lay out what these contracts are gonna be, that's when the specifics come in, or is that something that gets brought up tomorrow, I guess is my question.
Well, do the specifics need to be something that are hammered out by the boards right now? I don't think so. The mechanism is what needs to be hammered out. So if the city decides we want the county's help with something, how does the contract allow for that? So does staff approach staff and that works fine? Do we do it annually? Do we do it as needed? After it's done, who gets to decide who gets to do it? You know, how do we account for it? How is it paid for? All that stuff is what we should talk about with the county. What is the contract? What's the mechanism? I wouldn't spend too much time discussing board about who should be plowing 14th Avenue West, for instance. It's just not a policy level conversation.
Sure.
For
Yeah.
instance, with the business park, we kind of took it over from the county because now we have people up there. And it needs to be opened up a little sooner than it was being opened up before, and through the middle of the day also.
Oh, please.
Yeah. I was gonna let you get away with it for a while, but if you got lots to say there.
So, I mean, it's things like that that change.
Yeah.
So it
Does it
just
tend to-
became made more sense for us to start doing it. And we'd gotten that new 550 truck that made it a little easier for us to do,
Sure.
which wasn't possible before.
And I imagine that when you guys go through, if you get it, I mean, whatever, we don't have to get into all this right now, I guess. Is it one of those things, though, like if you were to, because there was, right, the changes, right, the flexibility within the contracts, or these agreements, I guess, that we're trying to come up with, the tendency, I imagine now, is that when you guys were like, well, we need to get up there because there's now businesses that want to be opened up earlier, did the county kind of peel back then and just be like, okay, you guys got this? And
Well-
then they don't come up there at all anymore?
I think it probably happened
Any-
the other way around.
Really?
Anything that I started plowing, they pretty much just quit,
Yeah,
so,
okay,
you know.
yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good, flexibility.
Well, a parking ordinance may help as well in saving time, because I know in plowing the city on a normal day, it's a 10-hour or more day.
Right.
So if ordinance parking does something to help, that may allow them to open up to be able to reach some things. But I know in plowing the business district, the school area and all that, those take priorities. So that's where town parking kind of plowing went to.
You bring up a really good point, I think, too, that with the calendar parking and with other changes and potential different agreement mechanisms that we've got in place, like, we're gonna have to, we can hammer this out, but then we also need to make sure that we're paying attention to it so that we can make the changes that are necessary within the first couple of years of operation to kind of fine tune that thing, and that's I think that's, as much as that's on Lenny and the other folks in the maintenance department, I think that's also on us to be reactive to that. Because there could be some things, like, we could have all the best intentions about how this is gonna work really great for you guys and for the county, but then have it just, like, a couple of things just be real terrible. And we can hash those things out as long as we know about them and we pay attention to
Well,
them.
and sometimes it's not, there is reactive. I always like the word proactive, and you can't do that with Mother Nature sometimes. But
Right.
I think as long as we leave the lines of communication open, and we try to understand what the other guy or girl's got going on, and then say, okay, how can we best do this? Due to these circumstances, these things need to be worked on first. How do we do this? Who can get to it? I never like the he said, she said, well, it's on them or it's their job.
Right.
I like the team approach, and to me, that's what this agreement needs to be about, is more of how can we cooperatively do what's best for our community together.
I imagine
Like
it
how we
was.
have been,
I
right?
imagine it was like that when they wrote this agreement.
Yeah, back
Yeah.
in
And-
70-something.
And, since I've been here, it's been like that, and it's not been like that, and it's been like that, and it's not, it just kind of depends on who's around.
Personalities.
And so something to think about is there a way for us to write this agreement that helps that process?
Right.
That requires regular communication that we actually do, that kind of keeps those relationships built, rather than what's happened, which is we still are very responsive at a staff level to figure out how to do these things, but that doesn't really change the trajectory of the agreement very much on any given year, and it kind of settles into who does what, and people don't remember why anymore. So it's kind of nice that we're talking about it again, and we can look at this and remember why. One of the effects of having a list like this is, I don't think it's clear at all that the county does more for us than we do for them. I think it's probably the other way around. If we were tracking effort, that we're doing a lot more work on county roads than they're doing on our roads, even though they're plowing most of our roads in the wintertime, just because of all the other functions that we're providing. And when we talk about accountability, we have to decide, how accountable do you want this to be? Do you want to spend a lot of resources tracking this at a high level so that we can
Well, have they?
make sure that we know? Or do we want to just look at a list every once in a while and everybody feels comfortable and accept it? Or do we...
I mean, it's a little bit harder to track than, say, when we look at the accountability from law enforcement, right? Because there isn't a call log necessarily. But it seems like it's as simple as hearing back, from Lenny and hearing back from the county. I mean, to have those, at the end of this season, right? To have that conversation, just making sure it's a living document that we're creating that is, we can take everybody's feedback. Because I don't think it's necessarily broke right now, but it's also maybe because it's got good personalities that are working together to be able to do it. And hopefully some of these other things that we're implementing will only make that smoother.
Mhm.
But
One of the beginning conversations was we're looking at these contracts because they might have outdated language
Right.
or language that doesn't apply anymore. And the feedback that we've received from, I don't know, the past 4 county engineers is this is a pretty unique situation up here. And that every time there's a new person, they're uncomfortable with it for a little bit until they figure out whether it's working for them or not. And so do we need to change the language just because of that, or do we need to reaffirm that this is the situation we want and move forward?
Well, I know that we had asked, I think maybe you had asked to see, one of us had asked to see, like, what does have you read the agreement between the county and the city for?
A long time ago, so I don't actually.
Yeah.
Well, we were
Remember
given
everything.
the actual
I thought we asked-
document.
You've had them.
Like that was emailed to us. I remember reading it.
Yeah, I thought we asked Kristen. if she
It was
could
like
go
written on
into that.
papyrus with like.
I don't think it's worth us spending time up front, or even maybe now critiquing the agreement,
No,
but thinking about what are the things in here that are no longer relevant.
that's all. I'll dig through my email, I guess, and look for that. Because I mean, I'm not obviously gonna write it, right? But like, I'd like to have some understanding to see like, yeah, just to grasp, I guess, the changes or what we're trying to
When it comes
satisfy.
to accountability in the street maintenance agreement, there is a mechanism in the existing agreement to track our levels of effort that has, as far as I know, never been done by either side. And so I assume that there was a level of comfort in the beginning that things were okay, the level of service on both sides was equitable and people were fine with it. I don't know whether people are still fine with it.
I don't know, and I don't know who does more, who does less. Truthfully, I don't care, because sometimes people are happy doing more when they can. Sometimes people are happy doing less because of how other things flow. We're gonna need a guiding principle to go by, and then my hope is that as a council, we encourage all of our staff that there's open communication and teamwork, and I think it'll go just fine. I think they've got somebody in there right now, even though she's here part-time and don't know for how long, who's willing to work with us and do that and encourage her department in that way. I think it's a good time to move forward with that because she's there and she is willing to do that. You're right. I don't know what'll come in behind her if somebody does and what kind of personality you get. So that's where I sit back and go, on behalf of our people and our personalities, my expectation is whatever we put down, people are willing to go the extra mile if they can for our citizens. And that doesn't get put in paper sometimes, but I think that people need to know that, that's kind of the expectation, but that's who I am. And when I've always done customer service, I try and go above and beyond if I can. Obviously, it's not always what happens, but I'm looking forward to working with her.
Well, and I think that's these are all good conversation pieces to bring into that bigger conversation. Like we need to have a context to bring into that conversation. And I think that understanding that a lot of the stuff is already working pretty well. I think and that we need to work on language. We need to work on mechanism. We need to work on what does this partnership actually mean? What are the elements of the partnership that we want to emphasize? Those are the things.
Having that board
Yeah.
support too, that's the model you want to see happen, and if the county also has that board support, that's great, because I know at a staff level, we just want to be able to cooperate. Like, if we need some help, we want to call up and get it.
Yep.
And if they need some help, we want to offer it.
Yep.
And that's the way we like to operate, so.
It seems all right.
Cool.
Just have it be a golden rule policy.
It's just in a context of limited resources and different perspectives and different priorities where it doesn't always get us there.
Are there any other parts of the city-county agreement conversation that we would like to spend some more time on? Or do you feel like we've got a pretty good primer on what we're how we're going to approach the conversations tomorrow.
Well, we basically have an hour with them, right? I think this is gonna fill that up.
Pretty quick.
When law enforcement agreement is very different in,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important to keep in
you
mind.
know, we're not a service provider in that agreement, where this street maintenance agreement, both entities are service providers. In the law enforcement agreement, we're just buying services. And I actually think the existing agreement, again, is what we want in terms of what we're asking for and what we're willing to give for it. The sheriff's office has a responsibility to provide law enforcement in the city of Grand Marais, because Grand Marais is in Cook County.
Mhm.
They don't have any responsibility to provide local ordinance enforcement, except for the contract we have with them, which is really the only reason we have that contract with them, so that they provide local ordinance enforcement for us. But it just hasn't happened as much, and it's been a kind of a gradual decline for a very, very long time.
Mhm.
And so this one feels like it is in need of reset, and that's why I think when we thought about how we're doing on these outcomes, two of them really came in as needs improvement, because
Right.
we want to see more local ordinance enforcement, and so that is a pretty clear position to say in any conversations with the county. And we'd like to have better accountability, and again, that's not a criticism of anybody's performance, that's just a recognition that we haven't built the mechanisms in place so that we understand what's going on here with this deal, or understand how to get what we want out of it, so.
So, can I, like, I mean, maybe we already, maybe talked about this, or always had a meeting that we talked about it, but I know that on the accountability side, especially in relation to this, you know, knowing that we want the ability for us to, and for them to agree to something, but for us to ask for something to make sure that it's equitable, how can that be done if we don't have the accountability side of it going past, or from the past, right? Like, how can we say,
Like, how do we know how much level of effort to buy?
right?
How do we budget for it?
How do we budget for that?
That,
And how do they know, and likewise, how do they know how to do that? What to ask for, right?
yeah.
So,
Well, with the law enforcement agreement, again, in the contract, there is a mechanism for, this is how many hours of service we're buying. We're buying patrol time, really.
yeah,
And we expect that in exchange for that, they use all their resources to do local ordinance enforcement, just as they would respond to any other call that comes in. You know, they still get to decide how they're gonna do it.
do we ever hear back from Pat as far as like when you do get calls? Because I'm assuming that they get calls about noise or pets or whatever local ordinance that they might be called in on. Do they have any way of tracking or getting those things and like actually if they were responded to? I mean, do we have a way to go back?
I don't know
We're not-
if there's a
maybe not
good
possible.
way to go back, because the way that they were reporting, when Pat did come here and give us a report when he was first elected.
Yeah.
And it included a response area that wasn't just the city limits. And so that's part of, again, if we go back to this, and we're talking about contract, and we have a small group that's negotiating the language of the contract, we'll figure out, what do we have to do differently so that you can actually report to us the things that we're buying?
Yeah.
And that's what we say, when we say accountability, that's what we mean, actual accounting of the
Right.
things that you're doing. And the other idea that we at least entered into this in spirit was, we didn't see the need to make significant changes immediately in the financial effort of either the city or the county, that we didn't want to disrupt their budget or ours if we didn't have to. And I think that a new contract doesn't have to, I mean, we can just move forward without knowing how much time it takes, actually measure it, and then come back and do it in a regular budgeting session, and then it's no different than anything else.
Yeah.
You get to decide the level of service you're willing to pay for, and you put it in your budget.
Yep,
That's great.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
So when we talk about local ordinance enforcement, that doesn't, I can't imagine it would, but maybe, does that include like some of our zoning rules? And Stephanie gave a good demonstration tonight. Would that fall under law enforcement, or who would that move to?
There have been complaints about, well, just say trailers and rights of ways, where that's a local ordinance that we have, it's in our city code, that says where trailers can and can't be parked. We've looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we hired the Cook County Sheriff's Office to do local ordinance enforcement, that's definitely a local ordinance.
Right, but
That
more
we're
or less,
thinking-
what about, I'm
You're thinking about her
I'm
overhangs,
thinking about
the
the
eaves.
overhang, I'm thinking about some of our building stuff.
When it comes,
Conditional use
it's,
permit somebody gets, who checks on it after it's done?
there are
Like
criminal
building permit, stuff like that.
Right.
penalties for breaking city code. And it's that criminal penalty element where the sheriff's office becomes a more appropriate responder. It's not the only model that cities use. We could have our own code enforcement people, but we don't. And if we had our own police force, we would have them dealing with issues that are in the city code like that. The zoning issues are not generally a criminal right-of-way situation, and we do have staff involved, and so we go back to that, having the right resources respond to the right problems, and I think there's gonna be some gray area where we figure out with the sheriff's office, well, does it make sense to have a deputy respond to this, or is there another way that would be better? And again, there needs to be that flexibility to have those conversations, but in this case, we're kind of starting from scratch,
Yep.
and there isn't really a lot of local ordinance
I'm just
going
thinking outside the box a little bit, and a bit money-wise too, that, you know, some of our local ordinance enforcement, it doesn't always have to be a deputy doing it, right? I mean, if a trailer's parked on a street, does it have to be a deputy that would go ticket or give them a notice that it needs to be moved? If it's a, what are some other examples? I don't know. Junk in your yard, however we want to determine that. Does it have to be a deputy, or could it be a staff member? That,
Of
and,
the county sheriff's department or
no,
of ours?
of our own. If the city hired, and I'm gonna make up a name, again, I'm thinking outside the box and money-wise, if we hired an enforcement personnel, code enforcement, you know.
Yes.
I mean, because depending upon how our conversations go with them, and they could turn around and look at us and go, you know what, we don't have the time for this, or you're gonna have to pay us X amount more.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, what's plan A, B, and C is kind of what I'm thinking in my head, that we have to have a backup available to us. So,
That we have, I mean, we do enforcement now, right?
We sent letters.
Even with all the confusion and the conversations we've had lately, it's a misnomer to say that there isn't any enforcement going on. So you certainly can have just staff people doing code enforcement, and a lot of cities have specific staff whose job it is to do code enforcement. In a smaller city, that's more rare, and it's much more often to have local police that are going to be doing a lot more of that stuff. It depends on what staff you've got. So, you know, do we have a backup plan? Could, if they aren't interested in doing it, and we wanted to buy that service from somewhere else, yeah, we could certainly find that.
okay. Yeah, just like I said, spinning A, B, C, what happens if, or what are some options to us?
It's nice to have the deputies involved for a lot of these.
Oh,
And
yeah.
just because they've got the right kind of training to have
Mhm.
interactions with folks that are maybe going to say no,
Yep.
and you know, they also have the training and experience to document what's happened, and just in case it has to go further.
Right.
So it's nice to have them be a part of the
Yeah,
process.
because if we eventually would get to, I don't want to call it criminal, but something where it moves further, then we're dealing with the county attorney's office, correct?
Mhm.
Because we don't really have a city attorney, or would
Well,
Chris?
we do, but he doesn't do our
No,
prosecutions.
when we're
not
talking about,
prosecutions.
oh, and Chris is here, by the way.
Yeah, we got him finally figured out with. the-
Oh, on the camera, I'm like, hey, wait a minute.
So he's he's really loud.
So that's
When he
not
talks.
something that he would necessarily deal with. We would go through the county to do proceedings? if
Most
we-
most likely, what if we're talking about code enforcement at a criminal level, we absolutely would work with the county attorney's office. If there's going to be any prosecution, that's who would do it. We do
Okay.
have a contract with them to do our prosecutorial stuff. A lot of times, code issues are civil matters, however,
Mhm.
where we're going to have Chris involved.
Okay. So much to think about.
Well, and I appreciate your thinking outside the box. Like, I do think that we need to bring other models of how this could be successful to the conversation so that we can figure out what's going to be the most, that works the best. So,
I think that definitely having the ability to have availability to have accountability in how we lay this out and what the ask is. It may say, you know, it may, when we look at it like in a budget sense, like you were saying with everything else is on a yearly basis, we may come to the point where they might be asking for X to do this, and we might say, well, geez, like, maybe we can integrate that, you know,
Or-
ordinance side, code enforcement side.
If we really want to step up what we do, they may say, you know what, we don't have the availability to do all that and patrol and answer and blah.
Yeah.
I don't know,
it'll be
you
a really
know?
interesting conversation.
You just, my head goes to, okay, what are all kinds of answers that, I know what we expect, but it's like, what's the unexpected? So,
Well, and I think also with this particular, with both of these conversations, for street maintenance and for law enforcement, I do think that to a certain level, we need to bring what we want, like what our ideal of how it should go. We need to bring that to the meeting, as well as our knowledge of what the current agreements are, because both of those things will be useful in trying to find that happy medium of where we want to be. So, good.
Yeah, and you know, if I would just be so bold as to say what I want here, I like having an agreement with the sheriff's office. I think it's good for them and good for us. And if we found a way to understand that effort level when they're doing code enforcement for us, so that they were comfortable doing it and we were comfortable paying for it, that'd be my preferred outcome.
noted, I get it. And it's
Great.
It's not that I'm against it, like I said, I just want to think outside the box and go, what happens if?
Yeah.
Expect the unexpected
Right.
type thing.
So the other thing, at the end of this memo then, my suggestion is that after your meeting with the board tomorrow, that we have small groups whose job it is to take the results of that conversation and start drafting up contracts.
Yeah.
That probably doesn't have to happen with all 10 of you elected officials in a meeting. It'd be easier to get that work done at a staff level. Maybe you want to have some elected officials involved in that. That'll be up to you all tomorrow. But that seems like where we're at. And hopefully the county's also done this. I know that Jeff said that the county board was also trying to talk about the outcomes that they were hoping for and their goals and stay at that high level in their conversations as well. So it'll be interesting to hear what they have to say.
Cool. Any other thoughts, comments, preparatory notes? All right, well, it'll be an interesting meeting tomorrow night. We have to keep ourselves on task. I know that's going to be kind of a challenging thing when we're talking about something as complex as these agreements. But we'll have an hour to talk about it. So that'll be something for us to really kind of get down to the nitty gritty and keep people on task with for. Thanks for coming out, Len. All right, so the next thing we have, this one's kind of a doozy. I really struggled with this one when I was reading through.
We struggled with it too. Like, it seemed that we have to just send this to you because we want to be as open with all of this as possible. But it took us a long time to figure out how to use this spreadsheet that they gave us, this Schedule I. And so here it is, and apparently in this contract, the attachment includes the original and the updated version of it. So maybe the best way to go about this is just to start by saying, does anybody have any questions?
Well,
And if not, we can go to the summary page that Kim put together that talks about how we're going to pay for this and where the sources of funds are.
Is that the revised Schedule I type deal?
It is
It's
the lovely colored one sheet
Yep.
revised Schedule I agreement table at the end.
The first
So-
part is the May 8th one, right?
the
original?
Yeah.
That should be the first one.
Do we, maybe you guys already, we couldn't see, because we were like, what? Like, how are these things so far off?
The bids.
But, yeah, were we ever able to look at that? Did somebody go and look at it?
Yeah.
That
I mean, they were released.
MnDOT, they have a whole contracting office, right? So most of what they're doing is just making sure the math is right. But they also look at a few outliers and say to the contractor, what's going on here? I don't think there's a very satisfactory answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I'd agree.
there's not a lot of these line items that are ridiculously out of line, but there's a couple that are. And there's not a lot of recourse for us to, with this arrangement, having MnDOT hire a contractor that includes our job, for us to go back and say, we're not gonna do that.
So here's my question. So when we built the PUC building, we had the contractor at risk agreement. And so when the contract was fulfilled and the cost of the project was less than what we had agreed upon, then we got that extra money back.
Well, we just didn't give it to them, yeah.
Well, we just didn't give it to them, right?
We paid
just
for their
we
actual
paid their
effort.
for their actual work, but we weren't held to a specific number value and yada yada. So how does that compare to this process that we're going through with MnDOT? Because it seems like this is a totally shitty agreement for the city, because we agreed and said, hey, we'll partner with you in this project, and then they're like, okay, cool, we'll do all the bidding, and so then they do the bidding and it comes back way over the estimations, and then like our recourse is really quite limited from that.
Let's imagine that we had bid ours separately from MnDOT's, and that MnDOT was willing to have us hire a separate contractor and coordinate that work. That they're probably not, but let's just assume that they were. And we got these numbers back. What's our recourse? Say no and rebid it is really,
Well, our recourse is being able to see what our engineers estimated certain things at, and at least looking at a bid, you can at least say, okay, well, where are the problematic issues, labor,
I mean,
the takeoff on materials, I mean,
so let's find a
this
couple
is off
of
100%, I mean, so come on.
pretty close, yeah,
Yeah.
80%.
What do our engineers say about this? Didn't they do a takeoff on a materials list, labor type thing, or how would
The
that?
original estimate,
Well, like the state and the engineer, they're off, there's about 300,000 between the two,
but the original,
the state's way off. There's
the
not
original
even-
spreadsheet that's included in this packet is the engineer's estimate. Like when we looked at this contract first of all, and we signed it and had included Schedule I and the city's contribution,
Yeah.
those unit prices were what the engineers expected
Okay.
to see.
But were these numbers yet released at that point? Like the line items and such?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Were they really?
yeah, we had them.
From the engineer?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
from the
not
engineer.
from the,
Yeah, and that's how we came up.
Yeah,
with
yeah,
it.
from the
Pre-bid.
engineer,
Oh,
not
here's
from
our-
the,
pre-bid.
not from the actual
No, we
contractor's
hadn't
bid.
been able to look at, when all the numbers came back, we
Yeah.
hadn't been able to
So when the
look.
bids
to
came
compare
back-
the
Well, and we
bids
still
compared
can
to
see
estimates.
it, but we have to,
Like
they don't
Drive
send
said.
it, they don't email it. You have to actually go to see it and either meet them or go all the way there.
So one of my
I mean,
like,
it's either public or it's not.
yeah.
If they can show it to us, they can show it to us. If they can't, they can't.
Well, my understanding is the state cannot email, can't mail, but they will
Right.
meet you and show you
That's
what it is. That's their
until the bid's
rules.
awarded.
Until the bid is awarded. Yeah.
Now it's been awarded, and this is
Yeah.
what you have.
So that's why we got it now.
So correct, like we will take a look at a couple of line items like you said.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong in assuming this. So the estimate, and I might be a touch snarky on this. The estimated engineering costs were basically the estimations from the engineers and like what they assumed a project of this caliber and scope would cost.
Yes.
Not just
And
that, but
then-
actually estimated based on the drawings and based on
Based on the
actual,
drawings and
not just
yes, the stuff that they were looking at.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting though from the actual contractor bids that came in, so you know what appears to me to be absurdly above the estimation, is that perhaps the contractors factored in some other things, such as this could be a really hard building season. It could be they could be really hard building conditions because of groundwater and working with other agencies and the cost of materials and laying the materials in the ground and making sure they're stable and all those sorts of things. And those considerations are potentially the ones that inflated the cost.
So that's the feedback we get back.
And finding employees.
And
That's the
you can,
hardest thing there.
I mean, you can make a
That's true for
laundry
construction.
list, right? And lots of bids were coming in high. It's just a bidder's market right now for doing these types of jobs. That doesn't help explain a few really large outlier line items.
Right.
That there doesn't, if it's hard to put in 8-inch sewer pipe, it should be hard to put in 6-inch sewer pipe. Like they should not be
Different?
5 times different.
Well, so continuing with what I was, with that line of reasoning. So let's say that it says the city's share is 2.3 billion, but they actually only spend 1.5. So then, is it just
No,
a similar
It's
situation?
not even close. So
That's not gonna happen.
the major difference.
But that's the thing, right? Like I'm wondering
not.
about how the agreement works out here, because
When
if
we had
they
a contract
underspend,
with McGough, there were not line items like this that said, you're gonna build us 600 yards of fill and 400 linear feet of wall, and there was just categories. And they estimated what each category, based on the subs they were gonna have to hire, was gonna cost.
Mhm.
And we negotiated that number until we were willing to pay that as a maximum, and they were comfortable accepting that as a maximum to do the project. And then they did the project, and they didn't have to spend that much money. They still made their percentage, just like they needed to. All the subs did the work that we needed them to. It just didn't cost as much as they expected. That model of having a general who's at risk on a maximum price, I don't know if MnDOT ever does that, and I certainly don't know if road contractors would accept it. This model is an estimated quantities contract, and so what the bidders are actually doing is saying, this is my price per ton of asphalt, per foot of pipe installed, per foot of, or square foot of 4-inch thick concrete walk. All those line items are specific items that the engineer said, we think there's this much of it in the project. In some cases, that's really easy, like we know how many trees there are. In other cases, it's an estimate still, and they may end up doing more excavation or less excavation, but not markedly so. So the real risk then is, what's that price, the unit price, going to be? That's what the bidders are filling in on the contract. And where those unit prices are exorbitantly high is where this contract is difficult for me to understand. And there's only really a handful of those. A lot of them are higher than the original estimate, but not 80%.
so then what happens? What happens if? So I'm just still having a really hard time with this.
Each.
Because if we approve these numbers and then the costs go massively over that, we're still on the hook for that.
So the cost can't change now. The unit price is what it is.
So then after this,
The only
like this
thing
is
that
the
can change-
maximum we could pay.
Nope.
See, that doesn't make any sense to me.
So let's look at an example.
That doesn't make sense as a contract to me.
Let's take a look as an example.
Like you sign contracts so that you know what to expect.
So revised Schedule I,
Maybe I'm reading into this wrong.
right?
I mean,
And the first thing we've got on this first page,
oh, yeah.
2521.518, 4-inch concrete walk. So it's on page 2,
Okay.
and I'm looking at the actual prices now.
Okay.
So the 4-inch concrete walk, it's the third from the bottom, and the quantity of square footage that MnDOT estimates in this project is 18,520 feet. Now, they've got detailed plans
Yep.
that they did the math and said, there's actually 18,520 square feet of 4-inch concrete walk. And the contractor said, I'll build that for you for $8.30 a square foot for a total of $153,000. Now, when the construction occurs, that number might change. We may build less or more of that walk depending upon circumstances. I can't imagine any because it's so detailed in its planning right now, but things happen in a project this big. So some of these
But no matter what we do,
quantities,
they're gonna do it at 830 a square foot.
and however many square feet are out there,
You're gonna-
now we're paying
This is
MnDOT
different.
to
Yeah.
do construction
Okay.
engineering, and part of that construction engineering is they're actually gonna be out there measuring all the actual quantities that were done.
That's the
So,
thing I have a question about is, who's the Okay. Who's making sure this work's getting done right?
Both MnDOT and our city engineer will be part of
Who's
the
our city engineer?
LHB.
Okay, so they're gonna be up here watching. this-
When they're installing the work that we're paying for,
Okay.
the water and sewer in particular, yes. And MnDOT's gonna be here, watching over the rest of it. And at quite a price, I might
Well,
add.
yeah, I understand that, but I'm just saying.
And that's one of the other frustrating things about this. This
They-
construction engineering is 8%. That's what
Of
MnDOT's charging
Total
us.
project cost.
8% of our costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so when they gave us the original estimate, it was a lot less, obviously,
Yeah.
because our total costs were a lot
A
less.
quarter of
Half. They doubled.
And it doesn't seem right to me that they're gonna have the same staff people do the same amount of work at the same level of pay, but we're gonna pay them twice as much for it.
Is it because of what it costs to come here and stay here?
But they were willing to do that
But they
at
were
the
willing
lower
to do it
price.
at the
It's
lower
a
price.
percentage of every dollar that gets spent on this project.
Right, that's a huge part of why this just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, like, I'm not super impressed.
You wanna look at the more obnoxious ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the 10-inch pipe and the 8-inch pipe.
Yeah, we found something there.
Yep.
Why is there such a huge difference on price per foot?
It's, all I can tell you is
Is
it's
somebody
not a
make a
mistake.
mathematical error there or what?
Nope, it's not a mistake. That's the price they quoted, or bid. It's $325 a foot for 8-inch pipe installed. That's, was,
What-
I don't know, 6 times what the engineer's estimate was?
Well, and then
I'm
how
in-
is 10-inch pipe only $64 a foot to
See,
install?
now, when we're looking for explanation, this is where what you're gonna learn is there isn't a satisfying one. There's no way to explain that.
Well,
They decide, I mean, when they're bidding in these projects, they have to decide where they want to put their risk, where they want to put their profit, where they want to put their, all those things. And this one is, they just rang the bell on this number and we're paying the price for it.
Construction drainage structure design spec one,
Did you go on a different-
$40,000 to $204,000.
Yeah.
That's just absurd.
So that one is the other one that's obnoxiously high.
No. Did you bring your own?
Other than that, I don't know if there's really,
Is this the,
Yeah.
It might be an
there it is.
old one. That's
Well, there's plenty that are
that's the
high.
original.
Page 6.
Hydrants are
yeah, that's the other one
twice,
that's talked about.
this is the one I got picked up at the, this is
Yeah,
the one I
so
picked up.
more
at
than
the
twice.
office.
Hydrants are more than twice what the initial
So now
quote
we'll go
was.
up five.
Oh,
It's just,
yes,
I mean,
yes, 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 yes.
Like this, it just seems irresponsible to me. And I know we're throwing around lots of words here, but
Okay, so,
like
no, it's
this
not.
is really hard. This is hard to deal with. Okay,
So-
Kim, what do you got for us?
You already pointed it out. Should
Oh.
we
Yeah.
make sure you saw the drainage structure one?
Oh, that's the
I
one.
didn't see that one.
Oh,
Where is it?
Page
What number?
6.
Okay.
So so it's on page 6. The first
It's
quote.
2506-502.
The first quote is for $40,000 for the drainage. Where is it? Construction drainage structures design spec 1,
4007?
$204,000.
and it went
Yeah.
from $40,000 to $204,000.
This is 2 stormwater collection boxes. We're installing one right now on 2nd Street.
Yep.
That's Thorson's project that we just paid the bill on. They're installing one of these. And,
How much
I mean, that price was higher than we were hoping it was gonna be, but it wasn't $100,000 per. This is quite a bit higher than the engineers expected. And it's also one of the things that we received grant money to pay for, and that grant money was kind of requiring us to do some treatment, not just put pipes in the ground, but do treatment, and these boxes are the treatment that we've got included in the project.
Does that grant money cover the cost of the new price settings?
No, we got $240,000, and we weren't planning on spending all of that on this project. We spent 140 of it on 2nd Street, and we were gonna spend 100 of it on this project, and now we've got it 200 instead, so.
And that's just the enclosure, the stormwater.
Well, this is the cost for it
That's
installed.
That's
that's
the
what we were
structure.
gonna pay with the
Okay.
grant money. We were gonna pay for these structures. Now it's not quite enough to cover it.
Covers about one.
So we could save some trees, we could paint some crosswalks, we could, think of all the things we could do for not spending 4 times the amount of money.
I think this is we can't
I know.
pick and choose right now, but I think we can go back and say, hey, don't order these.
Well,
Let's talk about this.
They wanted us to decide on all the amenities, remember that?
At a contract level, like they have a bid and they can't
Yeah,
pick and
but
choose things from the
We had to
bid.
decide on the amenities we wanted to put in this project, and we had roughly $800,000 that we knew we could spend,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And we
Yep.
spent almost 1.5. So how does this
I mean,
go back?
that whole.
Let's go-
change that
Those,
number?
That
those
whole-
line
Let's go to the
items,
page.
those
Because
line items.
That's,
Let's go to this.
That whole decision-making
I'm
process that
just
we had
saying,
based on those numbers.
I brought that up at that
Right.
meeting, it's like, we haven't let bids out on this yet. Let's get the bids before we decide.
Yeah, but the process has been such a mess.
But
Well,
no, now we have the
believe
bids.
me, I think I'm familiar with the process.
Fair
MinDOT,
enough, yeah. You've been
MinDOT has a
dealing with it.
contract with KGM to do this work. We can still go back to MinDOT and KGM and say, we'd like to change some of these quantities and have that conversation. So
Well-
now that we know what the prices are, we can do that. And it would be a change order, so which means KGM would have to approve it too. And some of these things, they might be willing to do that. But the bigger picture, what does this mean in terms of how this is getting paid for?
That's the bigger picture, yes, is let's get to the numbers, and then let's see what are we actually, what's coming out of the city's pocket,
Yep.
period. We knew, you know what I'm saying?
Yep,
I
that's,
mean,
we've got that right
We knew what
here.
we expected,
Yep,
and now we know what monies are available, some tap monies. I mean, do any of these monies change in value, or because the project is more, is there availability to change?
nope, those, all those
So what is
outside dollars are included in this math already.
Okay.
So,
So what is the state doing at this point then to fund their deficit on their predictions of what this is gonna cost them?
they found more money and I don't know where they got it from.
6 or 7 million extra they had to find.
At least, yeah.
Okay.
They have the ability to go directly to the legislature. and
Yeah,
ask
but I
for
didn't
it.
think they could do it right away.
I don't think they
I
did.
thought they had to wait until next fall. They're gonna go back for more money to finish this project.
Yeah, and I don't think they did go through a legislative process to find the extra money.
Okay.
When you look at, this is a huge project for us, and this is a lot of money. District 1's budget this is a tiny project for them. So finding $6 million is not, for us, it'd be
Yeah.
a life-changing event. For them,
Right.
it's something that they can figure out.
Okay,
So each of these columns is the
Okay.
source of money
This is
that we'll be
nuts and
using
bolts of
to
this.
pay
Yeah.
for it. And you can see we've added up the actual things from the contracts, and the total is the yellow row. Below that row is the previous estimate, and then the red number is the increase
The
above the
increase.
previous estimate. So we were hoping, based on the engineer's estimate, that the water fund was gonna spend $258,000 on reconstructing water mains for this project. It's actually gonna be $554,000. That was all gonna be city money before, specifically water utility money, and it's still gonna be that way.
and that's not gonna impact the reserves for the water utility.
Yeah, it's gonna
Of course it
impact
is.
them by about $300,000.
Yeah, 295,300.
But our
The biggest
intention was to
thing on
pay
this-
cash, we have that cash, we're gonna use it. What it'll affect most is, we're not gonna use that cash on the next project.
Yeah.
We were
What's
gonna have to
interesting-
borrow next time.
It's interesting to see how, I don't know the engineers I don't know who sat down and estimated this project, but the sewer aspect of this project it's unbelievable.
Nobody would have
How in
estimated,
God's green earth can they be off?
there's $250,000
$4,000.
in one line item.
What's that?
There's 250
Yeah, I
grand
know,
in
but
one line item.
That's what I'm saying, is how
You can't estimate that.
does this happen?
So it's just like pencil whipped or what? Right?
I don't know. How do you explain it? It can't be explained.
You don't know what you did.
I mean, I don't, like,
Here's the number.
Okay, so the sewer utility, we're talking an additional
Choking on my own.
$724,000, and it appears that, you know, this is also going to be paid for with cash.
That's
on
right.
hand. So what this does for the sewer is basically, you know, when we do First Street or any of those other projects, then that's going to be additional monies to borrow.
Yes.
So, far right column,
Explain to me.
the total is, we're coming up with 1.5 million more.
Mhm.
Correct.
Do we have that in cash right now to take and use?
In these different sources, yes. Yes,
We do.
By pulling from all these different sources.
But it.
Which
and-
we were intending to pull from anyway. But
Right.
you can see most of the additional money is half of it's being pulled from the sewer fund.
Well, that's the biggest.
Yeah.
Well, the electric was off by a ton too.
So now that needs some explanation. The electric is paying for streetlights, and
Oh,
streetlights are things that were TAP eligible funds, and so we had some of the TAP grant that was paying for some of that. So
streetlights that aren't on the highway though, right?
No, they're on the highway.
Doesn't the state pay for the highway ones?
They give us an
They
allowance for
paid
'em.
$66,500 towards streetlights.
Wow, would that buy two of them?
Not very many.
Not very many.
So
You
is
could
it
actually
that
look
we
up.
pick something that's way elaborate?
We didn't follow their model.
No,
I think it's more
there's
of a-
not. This actually isn't. You can see that the increase is
didn't remember.
460, but most of that increase is just shifting. We took all the TAP money out of it because we've got cash in the electric fund.
Okay.
And so we're using that. This is just basically using cash on hand in the electric fund to pay for this, taking the TAP grant out of the electric side of this and putting the TAP grant in the general fund side of it. So that's why this is such a big increase. It's actually not that
And that
big.
cap money was how much for the electrical then?
Well, we had $600,000 and we had a decent chunk of it paying for streetlights
Right.
that we were estimating in, $300,000 to $400,000 range. And it's going to be a little more than that we're going to pay, but it's not a lot more. The biggest difference is just a shifting of the grant money to a different area. So now the streets and the general fund other are paying for other things. You can see the streets shift is a little bit because all those prices were high, the concrete, the pavement, everything was higher than the engineer's estimate, but not a lot higher. And then the general fund other, this is where a lot of the TAP money then gets shifted into, and it's actually a decrease because we're going to just go ahead and say zero. So the $294,000 we're saying is coming out of the street reconstruction fund, $581 out of the electric fund, $875 out of the sewer fund, $554 out of the water fund. That is your $2.3 million.
Can you put the tap money in
The TAP, all the grants that we have are included in there.
there?
So that's how we think it should be paid for. There's really not any flexibility in terms of water and sewer. The only thing that you could consider is using more TAP money to pay for streetlights and less electric funds, but I guess I wouldn't recommend it because they have cash on hand to pay for this, and it just seems like the right way to do it.
Boy, that sewer one really hits hard though.
It does.
So we're seeing these, and there probably might be 2 or 3 people watching us, but I just want to know, one, we've said we're not impacting our levy for this because we have the cash on hand. And I know the PUC hasn't set prices for next year, but that does not impact, that will not be impacted by this necessarily, will it?
I wouldn't make that
They said there
statement.
was no-
And
Okay.
I think it's important to note that we all have already impacted the levy. We're not intending to raise the levy more to pay for this.
Mhm.
We don't need to. We have planned for this project over a long period of time.
Right,
We've accumulated cash in these funds for these very types of things.
okay.
And so it's not right to say it doesn't impact because we've been collecting rates and property taxes that we're now going to spend on this. So if we weren't going to do this, then we wouldn't have had to collect that money, or we could spend it on something else and we wouldn't have to collect it tomorrow. So it definitely is an impact, but we've planned for it. So
Okay.
we're not making any extra increases to pay for these. We don't need to. We planned for this, and we're going to be able to stick with that, even with these increases.
And what we have currently sitting now in our capital improvements and things, are things that we've planned out as well into the future. We've talked about First Street and other things, so we've kind of planned for those.
Yes.
And have included those already.
And when we look at our capital improvement plan, and we'll revisit it again this fall, winter, and just look at those projects and how we plan on paying for them, we have anticipated that we'll be borrowing for those. We anticipated that before these increases came in, so we knew that that was coming. And it's just now a difference in, well, one of the things we're gonna have to reconsider is how off are we on those estimates?
Right.
Um,
On
and-
our estimates?
Yeah.
Because if these are accurate estimates for street reconstruction.
Hopefully,
then-
some of this is an aberration and some of it's just a busy time, but is this a reshifting of what construction costs? If it is, then,
You have we've been approved to receive 240,000 stormwater grant funding for this project. Is
Yeah, that's
that up
included.
here?
no.
It's not in these numbers yet?
140 of it, we've already, as a matter of fact,
Spent.
here's,
'Cause I'm
102 of the 140 right here
Is in,
Is this one?
is this one.
Okay. So there's more of that money that.
Yeah.
can-
$100,000 of grant money.
Yeah.
That's
We have-
paying
It's
for-
not in here yet though,
No, it's not
No.
not included in here.
but it will be. I mean,
Well, we're gonna get it, it'll be in the general fund,
okay.
and other general fund
It'll go
dollars
in
are
the general
going.
fund, okay.
So then that's the other piece is we're suggesting to take that whole 300, the 294, 317 out of the street reconstruction fund and not out of the general fund unallocated. And the reason for that is because this is the type of activities that fund is designed for. If you decide that you want to put more money into it, you can always just take our undesignated money and designate it street reconstruction funds instead in the future. So just seems like if we've got a fund set aside for an activity and the activity occurs, we should use it.
Mm-hmm.
How did the county get off so easy?
They really don't have a lot of
Yeah.
responsibilities here. And they were stung pretty hard too in terms of percentage increase for
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
the signal that they have
Yeah,
to pay
because
for.
there's 2.5.
But that signal system and state furnished materials total 152,028. If you look at the next one,
Yeah.
it's exactly the same number. How did they get that right? How did that not change? Like they know exactly what a stoplight costs, but all the other signal stuff jumped like 75%?
Well, if it's state supplied, maybe it's not KGM paying for it.
State's paying for it.
Seems.
Man, I think what's frustrating, well, there's so many things that are
Well,
frustrating.
MnDOT's construction engineering cost is a direct percentage of the cost of the project.
Yeah, I don't
This
remember.
increase alone just handed them $94,000, and they had to do the work anyway. I mean, it's not
Well-
like effort related, it's a contract that, you know,
I brought that
we're
up.
on the
with them.
losing end of it. And this isn't, I mean, let's be real, this is a number we're looking at today, it's not the number we're gonna see 2 years from now.
Here's a.
And that's what kind of concerns me.
Yeah, me too.
It's-
The risk
I mean,
is
the risk is we
these
don't-
quantities are wrong, and they do more work than they've planned.
You pay more.
You're going to pay more.
You're not
Yeah.
gonna pay less.
And
Unless
the
you-
other thing is, if something unanticipated shows up that takes, they'll make a claim that this is going to take extra effort. You didn't tell us this was going to be in the way. Then you have to pay for that too. So there's still risk until we get the hole dug in the ground.
Well, that's why I asked who's monitoring the project, because if they spec'd out so much material and they don't use that, and then they come in and make a claim, they need more money for this,
Right. Who's going to be
who
watching those
knows
numbers?
what's
and-
going on?
Exactly.
Our engineers?
MnDOT's engineers mainly, but yes.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You gotta hire a general to watch a general, is kinda what I'm saying.
And MnDOT has specific staff that will be here the entire time, whose job it is to measure the actual quantities and what's actually built.
Okay. Wow, it's a complicated project, for sure.
It is.
I think what's frustrating too is that whether it's like price of the trees, I mean, like the kiosk price was estimated at 13 and it came back at 27 a piece.
Yeah, I saw
I
that.
mean, I know that's a small number in like the game of it, but it's like over double what the,
Right.
so, but to go through so much of this project, I mean, it feels like your hands are tied. I mean, you're the point in all the planning and all the different things that were associated with this project, you take away kiosks, bike racks, benches, amenities, trees, all these different things, and you make it, you strip it down to like try and bring costs down, and it almost doesn't accomplish what the whole point of it was in making it like a safer corridor, and for I don't know, it's
But this is the time now where that's the thinking process that you can go through.
yeah.
Is
I
now
know,
you
but
know
it-
the prices for these things, and is there any of these that are so far out of line that you would consider cutting them out or trying to find a different way to accomplish them? And the first place to go, unfortunately, leads us to a dead end, which is 8-inch sewer pipe should not cost what they've bid to
Right.
install. It shouldn't cost, it should cost 20% of that. So,
Yeah.
but we don't have an option to take that out of the project.
What if let's switch it all to 10-inch?
Yeah, it's cheaper.
I don't know that.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's got the capacity.
I mean-
Their 10-inch is based on, this is where the 10-inch exists in the plan. So if we said, we're gonna do it here instead,
Bulk buy, they can get a bigger discount. Maybe a
Yes.
10-inch is even
Do it
cheaper
all
than.
of course, it's, the price of the pipe is actually not directly related to the price of the installation of the pipe.
Well, part of it.
It's not much of it.
Well, it's got to be somewhat of it if it's what they're charging per lineal foot of 8-inch. I mean,
they're obviously looking at where it calls for 8-inch, and
I feel like
whether or not that's a more complicated place to be burying it.
Yeah.
Labor involved.
I feel like
They're not ordering from Amazon,
feel like-
are they?
No. Drones.
a sucker.
Well,
I like that one.
we're mostly stuck on the 8-inch, but that doesn't mean we're done
Well, I mean,
talking about
not
it.
just that. I mean, I'm talking about the whole
The next,
whole process.
the next thing that you might look at is those drainage structures. We had an understanding with a grant funder about that, but that was based on a whole different economic reality. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to go back to them and say, this is not a good investment of your money to put these in the ground for this price. And I would seriously consider trying to get those out of this deal for $200,000. And if we need to spend $200,000, we can do a lot better job treating stormwater with that money than this. And then after those two line items, it becomes a lot harder to find the next one where you say, I'm willing to not do that because we just don't save very much money.
You're saying the 8-inch.
The drainage structures.
Work on the 8-inch
007.
pipe. I don't know if there's any recourse there, but we'll keep working on it. And those drainage structures for $100,000 each.
Seems like it would make construction easier if they didn't have to. Are we doing 8-inch here or 10-inch here? It's
Should've
just
been
10-inch
more
everywhere.
vocal.
I'm just going 10-inch everywhere.
Well, I think that's fair. I think that's fair to bring that up. I mean, like if
It's
we're
not the size of the pipe that's the issue.
Well, I know it's not, but it
Well,
appears to
we
be on
know what they're
paper.
gonna. We have a bid for 10-inch pipe.
Based on a bid document that says this is where it's being installed.
Well, 1,963 feet, so it's a lot more digging.
I mean, I still think that
Oh yeah, but the lineal foot price.
this is a kick in the
Oh,
face. I mean, I think that it's fair for us to go back and
325
ask for,
60.
at least, even if that's kind of a dick move, I think it's fair to, the worst they can say is no,
No, you're looking.
And I agree with you on
Yeah, 60.
if we remove $204,000 from, that would be the sewer, right? The sewer fund that would come out of. I mean, we're still talking about a massive increase over what it was before, but we're not putting $700,000 into it. I mean, the two questions I have about that is, number one, without those structures, are we going to be able to properly handle the stormwater that comes into that area according to our stormwater management plan? So that's number one. And number two, is saving the $200,000 really going to be effective for us in doing other projects other places? So those are the two questions. I think I know the answer to one of them.
Well, I tell you, our stormwater management plan focused on flood reduction as one of its main goals, and these structures have nothing to do with that.
Okay.
The other goal is stormwater treatment, and these structures do that. But the cost benefit is pretty crazy at $200,000 for 2 boxes.
Well,
Yeah.
how much does a change order cost? We have no idea, do we?
Well, if they're willing to do it, but that'd be my recommendation if you want to look for
Where are these
places.
Yeah.
Where are they on the plan?
One of them's in the
Isn't,
Wisconsin 61 intersection area, and one of them is.
but can I ask a
That's
question, Mike?
Yeah.
I mean, we have LHB as our city engineer for a reason, right? I mean, can we ask them about that? I mean, I was kind of said it jokingly, but I mean, about that,
10-inch.
yeah.
I think we should.
Yeah.
I mean,
we can ask
what's
them.
the worst thing they're gonna say
Looks
is no?
like a mathematical mistake to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not even funny.
I mean that
Unless they come
that
back and said, oh, that's true.
Over $500,000 right there.
that ask has already been done.
Okay.
Is this the right number? Yes, it is. So now what, I mean, just to, I know it's not a joke, and we will look at what can we do about this, but you're asking the contractor, are you willing to take less money?
Well,
Why? Why would they say yes? I mean, this is a huge project for them too. And I don't know,
so we
I don't know what's
if-
in it for them.
We don't know if it's the same contractor installing the 8-inch and the 10-inch?
It's the same contractor, it's
gotta be.
KGM,
It's
they're doing the whole
KGM.
Okay,
project.
that's,
How much of this are they selling out? You don't know.
They're not gonna sub it, you know, they'll sub out concrete and they'll probably have
Well,
extra
well,
truckers,
like-
but they'll do the pipe.
Well, you don't know. I mean,
They've done it before here. I expect they will.
okay, but, yeah, I know. I'm just,
Just tell them that we won't take as much of those
They'll
the
bring in
big ticket
subs.
items like mobilization.
Well, even some of the things that we wanted to look pretty, can we, you know, at kiosks for 55 and 28, do we need $85,000 worth of kiosks right now?
who's paying for the work?
I know it's through the TAP grant.
Is
Could
that
we
part of
put
the
it somewhere
state?
else?
Is that part of the state's
I mean, that's,
project as far as the street goes? The work from the
You know,
tourist
pedestal
park
for
entry
$4,200
to
for art.
the north house? Who's paying
Do
for
it
that?
later.
On the
I
lower
thought
side
we
of the
really
highway?
would.
The installation of the sidewalk, moving the bike path. Are we paying for that, or is that part of the state bid?
Both.
Okay. Well, my concern about that was, why was that? Why did the state see that that's how they wanted that designed? I kind of failed to see the logic behind that.
The logic behind that is
Why move an existing bike path that's perfectly fine?
because there's no place for people to get out of their cars and walk right there.
Well,
And they're regularly
no,
walking,
yet,
parking
this
there.
is the point I'm making, is there will be room for people to get out of their cars and walk right there, because they're narrowing the road up 5 feet. There'll be plenty of room for a sidewalk, because that's what you want, is a sidewalk there, so people can walk, because now there isn't, I know that.
Yeah,
But they want to move the bike path up along the sidewalk. That's a lot of excavating, a lot of extra cost. Why don't they leave the bike path where it is?
well, they're not gonna touch the bike path.
Yeah, they are, they're tearing it all out.
Most of it's on our property and they're just gonna leave it.
I was told it's getting removed all the way to the north house. The new bike path is up along the highway, it's on the map.
They are building a trail, a wider section than a 5-foot sidewalk up adjacent to the curb. The entrance that goes down to that right now from 8th Avenue down into the park, that's gonna get regraded. There's not gonna be a connection anymore. But most of that trail is not, they're not doing anything to it because it's not part of their project.
Not the trail going up the hill, no, I'm talking about the trail
In
going into
the
town.
park, yeah. We can look at some plans about that.
Yeah, I need to look at it, because that's not what I was told. I was told that's getting excavated, there's retaining wall going in there, and that path is coming out. And if you go look at the pink survey lines, they're on the lake side of that path, which means it's getting dug up on the north side.
Not necessarily, but
Well, I'm just saying.
yeah,
it
we can look
looks
at the
like-
excavation
All right, well,
plan.
yeah, well, you know, if that was gonna happen, that's a lot of, I think, wasted money.
Just tearing something up.
Well,
like
that, the kind of,
I mean, you know, it doesn't do, it's not gonna change anything.
and redesigning at this point isn't
I'm
gonna,
not saying
isn't
redesigning,
gonna
I'm
save
just
us
saying you
money.
could actually leave it, because there's no there's nothing buried, you're not digging up sewer water lines on that side of the highway. I mean, you know, I'm just.
Just leave it?
The park has to move a sign, because now it's all of a sudden state right away.
Yes.
So they budgeted 50,000 for that. I mean, you know, I'm just looking at how this thing snowballs into more money per organization as it rolls through town.
But there is a good question, if the bids and KGM got it at an amount, I mean, definitely we could opt to see if we can do some change order. But there's a point, why would I want to lose money if I've been on a job to come here? Why would I, as a company, want to?
Well, it's not about losing money, it's about when an engineer says this is an estimate and your bid is double, I don't think anybody's losing any money here. I think if an engineer has bid this out, I think they bid it out on some scale of what the rate is, what the going rate is. They know what materials cost. They should know what materials cost. If they don't, it's like me hiring you to build me a house and you say 300,000 and you're done, you hand me a bill for 600,000. I'm gonna say, well, how come this nail is $40 when it was a penny?
Well,
You
you'd
know,
like to
I mean-
think that it works that way, but
Well,
where
it
I came
does,
from,
but when you're not in control of the
doesn't.
bidding like we aren't, we don't have control.
Well, I mean, so basically, our recourse on this is to bring change orders to lessen the expense, but then they still have to approve them.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
What's the engineer's suggestion? I'm sure you.
LHB?
Yeah.
About,
Well, you started talking about getting rid of these drainage.
I mean, they designed what
You know-
we asked them to. They haven't given us a suggestion on things to do
Engineers?
differently. We can
So
ask
we
them.
can offer, we're gonna put in for two change orders then? One for the removal of those
Is that
stormwater
because we're requesting
structures.
that, or is that because that's something engineers said we could probably
The
That's
drainage
something
not
structures?
go with?
That's
Yeah.
something we're,
Oh, no, the engineers have not said that.
Okay.
They don't, they're gonna do what you want them to do. They'll design what you ask them to design, so.
Well, true, but they're also being paid by us to design this, so when a bid comes in double, don't they look at that and have some concern over it, or are they paid on a percentage of cost of project too?
If you'd like to have them come to a meeting and ask them, I think that'd be great.
Well, I don't know, just thought maybe they'd have this discussion by now after they've seen this.
Well, they've
you
certainly had a lot of internal conversations about this, but they just don't, I mean, where can they go? There isn't a, here's what you need to do, folks, kind of answer.
Okay. No, I don't know, I just thought maybe, I don't know.
okay, so we should take a look at this and we should figure out if we're gonna put in for change orders here. You know, one of them, removal of those stormwater structures. Second one, I mean, it might be kind of tongue in cheek, but just to say we want to change all the 8-inch pipe to 10-inch pipe due to the cost, cost per unit. I know I'm anticipating that's not the way it goes, but like if we want to put that change order in, I mean, I don't think there's anything stopping us. You know, at least to get some conversation started about it. I mean,
Well, and
it
I'm
could
gonna,
save us a ton of
Well,
money.
the big question on the 8-inch and 10-inch PVC pipe is where is it going? The
Right.
location.
Right, exactly.
The
And
linear
why
footage
is that-
hugely different.
And
but-
why is that so dramatically different? You know?
But it almost does, I mean, there's also, there's accounting for rock, there's accounting for, I mean, so that's the thing where I feel like, I mean, the engineered plans, I guarantee you, that the engineered plans show that that's sitting in a certain amount of compact, you know, engineered fill that's compacted to a certain layer, that's
Mhm.
compacted, it's not like it's sitting on like bedrock.
Right.
And it, you know, and if it was having to go through bedrock to meet grades where they think bedrock's gonna be, then that wouldn't be in that line item. It would be in a line item separately for
Rock excavation
rock
in trench.
excavation and trench.
Yes.
So,
There's also a dewatering line item,
yes, it's always good to have that.
so I don't know what's left. There's also a contaminated soils line item.
you know.
I mean, I really can't explain
I mean, it seems like
what
it-
risk factor they're
if-
concerned about.
I mean, I guess if somebody said to me, like, I can build, you know, I mean, it's just like, well, if we do these walls in 2x4s or these walls in 2x6s, and I tell them it's actually, you know, it's a quarter of the price, less than a quarter of the price to actually build a bigger wall. they're gonna say, well, what, like, let's build a bigger wall, right? And whatever that reasoning is, I mean, if that's what I would tell somebody, there had to have been some reason they came up with that number. I'd assume, again, it's not based off engineers' estimates or, you know, regional pricing or whatever. It's somebody's actual bid that they gave for the project. So that has to be based on some sort of, and I, you know, I don't know, whatever, that's, we could go around and around on that, but that would be my recommendation
I think it,
to look. I mean, and like you said, you already on it maybe, but.
a lot of it, to me, stands just like, a lot of what we're expressing here is just this significant dissatisfaction with this process
Yeah,
and
it started.
with any accountability that has happened in it.
Well, it's $500,000.
I know, that's ridiculous.
I mean, it's like right away, anybody look at that, they made a mathematical error.
Right. Request that they recalculate? I mean,
Wow.
Are you sure about this? The thing that really burns me about it is that, okay, so if they're really estimating for the worst possible scenario, for the actual, like these actual bids that came in are the worst possible scenario, so that they are like the most expensive that they possibly could be, that's one thing. But that's not what we're talking about, you know? And also, like, even in the magical occurrence that one of these things came in under budget, we don't see that discount. Like, we don't see that.
I mean, that's the difference between time and materials, or cost plus versus bid.
Well, that's one of the things we'll end up having to talk about.
How's the contract read? How's the contract protect us on, I mean, I haven't read through the whole contract, but
This contract is,
is there a contract, who has a contract with KGM, the state?
yeah, MnDOT does.
So how does that read to protect us in certain aspects of this that we're responsible for paying for?
I mean, we've got these prices. This is what, if, you know, it just depends on the quantities at this point.
Okay.
If it goes over, are we held accountable?
If there's more quantities for our items, yes, we pay for them.
Is that where I guess I didn't look into that. Is that where a lot of these, is it the quantities seem, because they took their quantities off of the engineers' quantities, so the quantities.
The quantities are the engineer's quantities.
Right, so the quantities they use, it's more the unit cost.
The only
or
thing the contractor
change.
fills out is the unit cost.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel super good then.
Uh-huh.
Because if the engineers were that accurate
Yeah, I mean,
with their
that's- if they're
estimations,
using-
holy shit.
Well, the quantities are exactly the same, yeah.
But that's what
And the
I'm
engineer's
saying.
estimates were really different in the price
And
per
the
quantity.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm
Right,
saying that
yeah.
like if the contractors they're not creating the estimates of what they're actually going to need. It was the engineer that did that. And right now, I don't have a ton
So that,
of confidence in the
KGM
engineer.
didn't take off, they didn't do a takeoff for the project, they just took the engineers'
Engineers' quantities and
Quantities,
what their bid prices were for
materials.
each one.
description of materials and plugged them into a unit price. So if
I mean, I don't know what their
So
process
if the
is to come up
engineers
with their
are
unit
off,
price.
Well, but
Quantities
if
wise?
an engineer's off 500 feet on 8-inch pipe,
Yeah.
that's 500 times $325 a foot.
Right.
I mean, the engineers need to be on. So we don't know what the variation could be, plus or minus.
I mean,
What if the engineers made a big mistake on something here, and we haven't caught it, because we don't have a secondary.
Because
Well,
we're not engineers.
Yeah.
But,
What about performance of the contract, work performance, timelines, stuff like that? Anything in there protecting the city?
Yeah, I mean, like,
You know,
are we going to be able to get a
the state
report?
runs all that, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Are we going to be able to get a report on how things are progressing?
Yes.
Like, that was my phone.
It was your phone.
Okay. Well, I think that's important to know how that's gonna play out.
I mean, the MnDOT will have construction engineering staff here on site during the project. They'll be giving regular updates. We can have them come into your meetings and give a regular update if you'd like to. But if you want more often, they'll be doing them more often, weekly updates. We're gonna be working with them to figure out the best way to make sure that everybody can get updated on what's going on.
It,
Is what it is.
Great.
yeah, it is what it is, and obviously, I think we should have updates, but here's the thing, if they're not doing what we think we should, is it any different than we're not following zoning ordinances that I mean,
That's fair.
what are we gonna choose to be angry about, and how do we deal with it?
Well, I think we have a right to be frustrated with.
Oh, I'm not saying we don't.
And in that vein, when the 8-inch pipe comes in, an extra 500 lineal feet of 8-inch pipe, or 1,000 feet, or whatever, because, or whatever it is.
Can we
I
have
mean,
a con-
it's simple, like with a kiosk, right? Like, well, you know what, like, let's not add that third kiosk, because now it's gonna be, $68,000 instead of what we thought was gonna be $23,000. But it's a whole different ballgame when you're talking about subterranean aspects of.
So the bids
It
have
is.
been awarded, correct?
Yeah.
Contract signed. It's
Yeah.
Okay, so we can talk to whoever we want to then.
Absolutely.
Good.
I mean, who do you want to talk to?
But
Call
if,
an estimator at KGM and I'm gonna ask them,
Sure.
what the price per foot, explain it to me.
Well, and they have a commitment.
Gotta
To,
be able to explain it to
well,
me.
they've got they should have a commitment to talk to you too, because
Well, I mean,
we're paying.
the state doesn't
paying
know, they
the
haven't
bill.
asked them, or have they?
They have,
Oh,
yeah.
what did the state say?
They said
That's just the price per foot, that's.
they're
what it
worried
is.
about rock, they're worried about water, they're worried
Okay.
about contaminated soils, all things that have separate line items in the contract.
You let me know if you're gonna call them, and I'll
Well, I'm
show
just
up.
saying,
Show up,
I
and we
mean,
can have a
you know,
conference
didn't-
call.
That's 1,900 feet of 8-inch. Wasn't this didn't they do a lot of pre-drilling and they know what they're digging into?
I'm
We're
trying
not-
to tell
We're digging
you,
up old line and putting in new line, right?
there's not a
Aren't we-
satisfactory
Yeah,
explanation
but we're
for
digging
this
up
price.
old pipe, putting in
Yes.
new pipe, so why would there be rock on top of old pipe? Are we burying it deeper? Are we changing the route, the course?
And even if we were, we have a line item for rock.
You're not going
Right.
to find what you're looking for.
No, but we're not changing anything that's pre-existing, right? Rerouting anything, moving stuff?
Yeah, we're moving stuff, but not
Okay.
mostly not. Mostly
Mostly
it's
not.
just right where.
so if the
No,
No, it's
things,
just as,
if the things that,
it's very
and I'll say
interesting.
you guys are talking about changing that you're thinking you'd like to, and KGM says, nope, not doing it.
Well, they won't have
Are
to.
there,
They're gonna have to
but
talk.
are there other things here that we might be more likely, even if we save $100,000 on the TAP grant that we can turn around and use towards lighting, which, I mean, to me, that's some of the stuff that we should also, again, I'm gonna go back to Plan B, C. If we take $100,000 out and don't do kiosks and don't do a pedestal, we're adding another $460,000 basically for electric that we have to pay. Can we save ourselves $100,000 that way to use by removing some of the sparkles on the dress, as I
Well,
like
the
to refer
kiosks
to?
and stuff like that are coming out of the street fund, right?
Well, they're,
In the end, it's not important because the TAP fund crosses the boundary between the electric and the general fund.
okay.
So that's an answer to Jay's question, not yours, Kelly. Your question, Kelly, is yeah, absolutely you can. Yeah, if you want to save money here, anything you save that has to do with either the electric or the general fund, you can save it in either the electric or the general fund.
And I think, yeah, and that just goes, well, I'll stop talking here soon. Just that, like, all of this plan, all of these 40-foot long printouts that we have of what the project is and all of this stuff. I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at that, right, those things, those amenity sides of things, but it's, that to me is, just, you're baking a cake and not putting the frosting on it, the frosting's the best part, that's what you see first,
Yeah,
like that now.
but
I know,
It's-
but it's
it's-
expensive.
It's usually the
I'm gonna-
blacktop for me.
I'm gonna go back to this when I say, when I say the sparkles on the dress,
Yeah.
sometimes it's the girl wearing it, right?
There you go.
So when you come into our town, you might not see all the sparkles, but it's gonna be the people who serve you and do it right that make you wanna come back.
No, I agree.
And again, I recognize what I'm saying is not a solution to saving us a lot of money when we're talking at this cost. But, like I just said to Jay here on the side, when I brought up that we didn't do what had planned in front of the dentist's office there and remove that, at the time, we thought it was like roughly 75,000.
God, who knows how much.
I wonder what I saved us, and I honest to God wish I'd have spoke up more and said, what about this? Because there were other things that I went,
Well, and at
we
that
can have that
point,
conversation still, right? I mean, like even the letter that we got from Aaron about the tree that's by the library and the change that they want to do there. I mean, it's like, well, what if that saved? What if, you know? and I
Well, you're
don't-
gonna have that conversation next meeting.
Mhm.
It's not gonna go the way you think it is. It's not gonna be a saving
No.
unless you wanna not replace water mains or not install a hydrant.
And then,
So, I mean, if we just look at the one thing, yeah.
it's a hard one
Thank
to
you
explain.
guys, Kim and Mike, for that, like figuring, like this,
Laying it out.
yeah, laying it out. It's really-
So,
There's,
Assuming
you
that
don't
this
need
is
to
just
take
going-
any action
yeah.
tonight, other than
What do
at
we-
some point we have to pay this bill, and that some point is October. So, you
Wait,
know,
we
if you
have
wanna,
to pay up front for this?
yeah,
Well, that's pretty.
isn't that spectacular?
So someone can sit on our money.
For 2 years before they.
Shove it in a
It's the way the world
interest-bearing
works. Isn't it
account.
great?
Is this a non-bearing interest? Is this a?
It doesn't matter.
There's not
It's
much
theirs.
We're not really making a lot of interest on our money these
No.
days.
all right, well, thank you again for putting the information together and for kind of doing a significant pivot. I would say that I would give it to the council to take a look at these numbers, and if there are additional questions or ideas for savings, then we should bring that to another meeting.
To who? Because they can't fix it, so what are we, and I'm okay with that, but here's the thing, what are we gonna do with it?
If we have to ask the contractor about it. Like, that's the thing, is that we have to put in a change request or, a change order for something like that.
So, we've talked about some things tonight. Is that the direction that we wanna move, and would we not wanna, why do we wanna wait 2 more weeks, or why do we wanna wait another month? If we've gotta pay it, isn't now the time?
Well, we came up with a couple of ideas.
Did we
for-
ask, I mean, was that?
There's
like-
not going to be any action you take that's going to change the number you have to pay MnDOT tonight. This contract is based on the contract they've got.
Yeah, it's
No change is going to happen fast enough to affect this number.
Okay.
just the town blows away.
So, alright. So do we still have LHB look at that? I'm stuck on